Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we are absolutely geeking out over watercolors, breaking down 25 incredibly practical, money-saving secrets from professional artist Anna Bucciarelli. These tips come straight from her highly acclaimed encyclopedic book, which, by the way, recently spent 4 weeks ranked #1 on Amazon. So, if you've ever felt like watercolors are just too unpredictable, tricky, or downright frustrating, you are in the exact right place. We're going to clear the air and see exactly how this beautiful medium actually works. Okay, let's dive into this. We've structured this masterclass to systematically transform that unpredictable watercolor chaos into a manageable, truly enjoyable workflow. We'll be walking through perfecting your materials, the rapid-fire toolkit, mastering essential techniques, color and pigment behavior, and finally, painting smart workflow secrets. All right, starting off with Section 1, perfecting your materials. Because honestly, fixing your foundation is half the battle. It is a huge relief to learn that watercolor's tricky reputation is usually about the gear, not your actual skill. Like, take a look at the stark difference between paint names and pigment codes. If you walk into an art store, you'll see paints with these incredibly romantic names like Sleeping Beauty or Green Gold. But here's the catch. Those names are completely inconsistent across brands. Green Gold from one brand can look entirely different from another. Instead, you really need to rely on the International Color Index numbers. For example, PR 122 stands for Vibrant Magenta. That specific pigment code will behave and look exactly the same whether you're using Daniel Smith, Schmincke, or Winsor & Newton. Oh, and before you go buying full tubes of those pigments, try picking up a $20 brand dot chart. This is an incredibly cost-effective little tool that lets you test the actual paint dots on your own paper to see their granulation and behavior before you commit to the full price. But let's say you've done your research, right? You've bought the absolute best, most expensive paints out there. Why do they sometimes still look completely dull and lifeless once they hit the page? This is such a common beginner question, and honestly, it drives new artists crazy. Well, according to the book, the surprisingly simple culprit isn't the paint at all. It's your paper. Your paper absolutely must be 100% or at the very least 50% cotton. If you use cheap, non-cotton paper, your paints are just going to dry dull and your essential wet-on-wet blending techniques simply won't work the way they're supposed to. And to save yourself even more hassle with that paper, look for watercolor blocks. These are pads of high-quality paper glued securely on all 4 sides. Using a block completely prevents the paper from warping and buckling when it gets wet, which completely saves you from the tedious chore of stretching or taping down your edges. It's a lifesaver. The book also breaks down the 3 main types of cotton paper and how they directly impact your final artistic results. You've got hot-pressed, which is super smooth and fast-drying. That's amazing if you want crisp details that scan perfectly for digital prints. Then there's rough paper, which has a very pronounced texture and dries slowly, making it great for bold, expressive strokes. But cold-pressed, that is the absolute perfect middle ground. It gives you a little bit of texture for softness, it's smooth enough for details, and crucially, it dries slowly enough to allow for beautiful, seamless blending. Moving right along to Section 2, the rapid-fire toolkit. Let's talk about some really smart supplies. The book outlines a few unconventional tools to solve very specific, frustrating watercolor problems without emptying your wallet. There are a few absolute game changers you're going to want at your desk. First up, synthetic oxgall. If you live in a dry climate and your washes dry way too fast before you can blend them, literally just a few drops of this medium in your water naturally extends the drying time. Next is masking fluid, which preserves your crisp white highlights. But whatever you do, please never use your expensive brushes to apply that latex fluid. It will absolutely ruin them. Use cheap rubber color shapers instead. For sketching, grab some hard pencils and clean up your lines with thin, retractable erasers to protect the delicate surface of your cotton paper. Also, to prevent the natural oils from your hands from ruining a pristine wet wash, wear a smudge guard glove. And finally, invest in a good brush soap with a natural conditioner like olive oil. It gently cleans and reshapes your bristles so they maintain a fine point for years. Okay, Section 3, mastering essential techniques. This is where we learn to actually manipulate the medium. Now that we've got our tools in place, we have to manipulate the watercolor once it's actually on the paper. And there's a huge paradigm shift here. Traditional watercolor uses absolutely no white paint, 0. If you want white, you have to use the white of the paper. So to create delicate white flowers or glowing highlights, you have to completely reverse your thinking. This is called negative painting. It involves defining shapes by painting the dark space around them rather than painting the objects themselves. You're essentially filling in the background to carve out your bright, unpainted focal points. It requires a whole new way of seeing the world, but it is essential.
Another fantastic method you have to try is the wet-on-damp technique. It's a subtle twist on the classic wet-on-wet. Here are the precise steps. First, wet the paper. Second, and this is the absolute secret, wait a minute until the paper is just damp, not shiny and pooling with water. Third, apply a concentrated color with a fine brush. Because the paper isn't soaking wet, the paint stays exactly where you put it, but it still slightly softens at the edges. This makes it absolutely perfect for painting delicate petal veins, soft fur texture, or gentle shadows without losing control.
Now, it's really interesting as a technique that flips a common beginner mistake into an intentional, magical effect. Have you ever had a random drop of water hit your freshly painted paper and it pushes the pigment outward into this weird, ugly ring? That's called blooming. But instead of fighting it, use it intentionally. It adds incredible organic, natural texture, especially when you pair it with heavy, super granulating pigments like Daniel Smith's Green Apatite Genuine. When those heavy pigment particles separate as the water drops in, the resulting texture looks incredibly natural for things like leaves and moss. It's basically letting the water do the hard work for you.
All right, shifting gears to Section 4, Color and Pigment Behavior. Let's get into the science of color.
Focusing on how pigments behave on a microscopic level, the book highlights that not all paints sit on the paper the same way. You have highly staining paints like phthalo blue. These deeply embed themselves right into the cotton fibers and are notoriously hard to lift off once applied, which makes them great for strong foundational layers. But on the other side, you have non-staining paints like cobalt blue. These sit delicately on the surface and can be easily lifted away with a damp brush or a tissue. Lifting a non-staining blue is a brilliant trick for creating fluffy white clouds in a sky or pulling out soft highlights on a shiny object.
But here is a major pain point I am sure every artist has experienced at least once. You lay down this beautiful, bold wash. It looks incredible while it's wet, but when you wake up the next morning, it looks flat. Why did that vibrant wash lose its vividness overnight?
Don't panic, you didn't do anything wrong. This is simply the drying shift. It's the completely natural loss of brightness and sometimes a subtle shift in hue as the water evaporates from the paint matrix. The author reassures us that this frustrating shift happens with all brands, even the absolute top-tier ones. The simple fix? Glazing. You literally just apply a second wet-on-dry layer of the exact same color over the dried area. This instantly boosts the saturation and brings the color right back to life without overworking the paper. And while we're on the subject of fading colors, it turns out we also have to watch out for fugitive pigments. You should always check the light fastness ratings on your paint tubes, which usually run on a scale from 1 to 4. Some absolutely gorgeous colors, like opera pink, are considered fugitive, meaning they will quite literally fade away when exposed to UV light over time. If you do use them, you'll definitely need to frame your work behind UV-protective archival glass, just to ensure your artwork survives for years.
Which brings us to our final section, number 5, Painting Smart. These are the workflow secrets that really tie everything together.
When it comes to planning your painting process, a major revelation is that shadows are never flat gray. Beginners constantly ruin their paintings by mixing a dull, flat gray for shadows, which completely kills the dimension of the piece. In real life, shadows are rich and full of reflected color. If you're painting a snowy landscape, try using warm and cool blues for the shadows. If you're painting a bright yellow daffodil, reach for violets and purples to give it depth. It's also highly recommended to work from golden hour reference photos whenever possible. That strong, angled natural lighting provides clear, colorful shadows that make defining the form of your subject so much easier.
And when it comes to painting the background around your subject, there's a brilliant workflow trick for creating immense depth. First, pre-wet the area around your subject with clean water. Second, drop in cool blues, because cool colors naturally visually recede, which instantly pushes the background back. Third, and this is crucial, let that layer dry completely before adding any darker washes on top. This masks imperfections and gives you a velvety, smooth, dark finish. The book offers a really great pro tip here too. Keep a clean flat brush or long, elegant sword brush nearby. They are incredibly useful for easily lifting accidental splashes off your background or for painting remarkably precise, fluid botanical lines. I want to draw your attention to this final thought from Anna. Don't try to finish your painting in one sitting. Watercolors work best when you build them up in layers. This might just be the most profound secret of all. Because watercolors are inherently transparent, building true depth, realism, and rich texture requires immense patience. You have to let each individual layer dry fully before adding the next one. Rushing it and painting wet over damp when you shouldn't is absolutely the fastest way to end up with a muddy, overworked surface.
So whether it's finally swapping out your cheap paper for 100% cotton, using a rubber shaper for your masking fluid, or consciously trying out the negative painting technique, you now have the tools to bypass the most common pitfalls. It really makes you want to get out there, experiment, and embrace the unpredictable nature of this medium, right? Thanks for joining me on this explainer. So the next time you're staring down a blank page, which of these secrets will you use to transform it?